Hey guys, how is everyone doing? Welcome back to Critical African Thinkers. How is my mic? How is my video? So, how's the audio? How's the video? Yesterday, we had a bit of a choppy screen because I was using the hotel Wi Fi, but I'm currently on my phone Wi Fi, so I think it will be better this time. So, let's come to the show. Remember, this is Critical African Thinkers. I'm your host, Charles. This is a place where we question everything, where we examine everything under the microscope of logic to ascertain what is most factual and logically consistent. So, in today's show, we're going to be talking about the hood, understanding the dynamics of the hood in America. And as the second part of the show, we're going to be talking about interracial dating, right? So, I have here with me Wolf, who has experience because he grew up in the hood. So I just want to understand the culture of the hood, what the hood is, how the people in the hood, how they think, how they behave, how they act, what is possibly responsible for the conditions that is found in the hood today in America. So these and many more are what we're going to be covering in the show today. So let's sit down, sit back, relax, and listen as we're going to be having a very interesting and fantastic show. So Wolf, welcome to the conversation. How are you doing?
I'm good. How you doing, Charles?
I'm good. This conversation, we had scheduled to do this conversation a while back, but you've not
Indeed.
had. So I'm glad that we're finally doing it. I'm glad that you do have the time for us to talk about this today. And I do hope that people listen and throw in their 2 cents, right? So, can you give us a little background about yourself, right?
Yeah.
Um, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. So, I'll put it out there. My real name is Zachariah. I was supposed to be named Zach by my mother. I'm biracial. My mother's white. My father's black. And how it came to be is in the area I grew up, Richmond, Virginia. You have Alexandria, Virginia, which is across the water. Across the water is where the country white people live. But in Richmond, that's where the gang culture, the black culture we call the hood is from. And what, basically happened is I aligned more with the black side than the white side because that's what I grew up in. I didn't even see the white side of my culture for say until I was 19 years old. And I seen stuff that, is not great, but I'm not gonna put, names out there, but I've discussed some of it in Charles Discord before publicly, and I'm here to hopefully answer questions you guys have and shed some light on things that people need to know.
Wow. So that's interesting. So, do you mean to say that you grew up in the hood? I mean, in
Yeah.
Richmond, Richmond is in Virginia, right?
hmm It's the
Okay,
capital.
so yeah, so you grew up in the hood. How
Yes.
would you describe the hood? What are the features? What are the defining features of the hood? Isn't it just like any other place where you have the good parts, the bad parts, like any other city? So what is the hood itself? For people who may
Okay.
not understand what it is, can you paint a picture of
Now,
what the hood is?
the best way to describe it to people is the hood is going to look different depending on the area you're in because of the geographical location. But describing just Richmond, it's an inner city. There's a lot of government run complexes, as we call them, Section 8, government built program cities, government built program houses. And there's, you got the workforce, labor force, you got the social security service like normal. And it's basically almost like, think of it like a rural type of area where it's like houses on corners. You have turns, you have houses that go to dead ends that come back around. And it's like a neighborhood, but it's more of a hybrid between an inner city and a rural area. People confuse the inner city does not necessarily mean like Los Angeles. Inner city can be a hybrid of a rural and an inner city location.
Hmm. So in this hood, it seems as if there's a lot of government presence in the hood. I mean, you
Yes.
talked about government housing, you
Hmm.
talked about government as aids, government funding, and all that. Isn't this like maybe a socialist utopia? You know, if government is providing everything, right? Isn't that like partly explains what socialism is? Do you think that is do people in the hood think that there is anything akin to socialism applying to their situation in the hood?
As far as that, Charles, the main topics of conversation, it doesn't get as deep as you're going. Everything discussed in the hood is base level. We discuss things such as racism, but it's not described how we talk about it in your Discord. It's really base layer stuff. Everything is base layer discussed in the hood. Unless you come across what we call old heads, which are older people that have lived there for a long time, that have educated themselves on how these things came to be, and then they try to help the youth. But the youth does not talk about these things on a very deep level like we do. That's the difference. They don't understand necessarily what you mean when you say socialism. Does it make sense?
Okay, so yeah, it does. So it does. So tell me what it's like to live in the hood. Maybe just describe like the life, your life in the hood, any particular day,
Okay.
from waking up to what exactly happens in the hood. How is it run? Yes.
Okay. So you have what we call districts. You have the district where I came from, which is Mosby Street. That's where the Pyrus and the GDs run. You have Crips in another district, and then I think it's Latin. I could be wrong. It's been a couple of years, but I think it's Latin Kings in the North District, and it's basically segregated areas where the gangs run the territory. And there's an understanding among those gangs do not cross this territorial line that we have drawn. And if you do, there's going to be problems. Basically, you have to pick which district you want to be a part of, and it comes down to where you live. You can't be a lone wolf, pun intended, Charles, in the hood like this unless you intend to get your education and leave. And even then, you have to avoid certain groups and you have to understand the language and how things are run. The language in the hood is much different than what people may discuss in a city somewhere. Whereas you may take it as if you wave at somebody, that's a sign of, greeting somebody. In the hood, that's taken as a sign of aggression, meaning that you want to fight or you want to throw hands. So you have to understand the language, which is why a lot of people that don't grow up in those areas want to go there to see what the experience is like, which is a terrible idea.
So what you're saying basically is that there are turfs, right?
Yes.
The hood is divided into areas of control, areas of
Hmm.
influence, and
Yes.
different gangs control certain parts of the hood.
Hmm.
So, what exactly are they controlling? What resource is there in the hood that these gangs are controlling to begin with?
The main thing that they control is musical influence, which we call rap music in the industry. And the
Mm.
other thing that they control, Charles, is they're very good at planning. They're very good at recruiting. I tell people gangs are as good at recruiting as the military is. They know how to promise these kids what they need to get them in a better situation. To give you an example, Johnny over here might be the leader. And if he sees that you have potential, he'll throw you a bone. He'll throw you, I don't want to get, talking crazy like that, but we call it birds, which is like bricks. We have different terms for what we call drugs, and he'll help you get a hold of these drugs. But see, it's called a spot. He'll give it to you, but you need to sell this, push it, as we call it, and bring the money back. And if you can't provide that, Charles, you signed up for something and you didn't uphold your end. Therefore, that's where the terminology blood in, blood out comes from.
Mm.
Once you sign on board, you ain't leaving. unless you have a real respectable family presence in that gang.
So the control is about money. It's about drugs. It's not about some
Control, money,
substantial
influence. It's money,
influence.
influence, and the ability to because see, Charles, how it works, it's very similar. Like you have rankings to this. You got Pyrus, you got Vice Lords, you got GDs, you got Latin Kings, you got all the different sets. And you got to put in what's called, you got to earn your stripes. You have to do things to go up the ranks. And once you reach certain points, there's no going back. And I'm not going to say it on stream because it would probably get the stream taken down, but I told you the final ritual that you have to perform to become a gangster's disciple.
Yeah, you
And
did.
it's pretty disturbing. So it's
So,
about the recruitment process and the control of the community because it benefits the ones in charge.
so as a young man
Does it
growing
make
up in the
sense?
hood, yeah, it's well,
Charles,
it
the best
makes
way I can
sense.
think about it like a community
Can't hear you, Wolf. You cut off.
called the trap house leader. The trap house leader is the one that runs that district. He's the one that runs that block. And therefore, he is the one that calls the shots. That's why if you have problems, you will get handed a gun for say and be told to go do this to prove that you're really down with this, which is unfortunately what you see get pushed in a lot of the black culture movies that, some of it's true, some of it's not.
Hmm. So this seems a lot to me like honor culture, right? There are certain codes that you do
Mm-hmm.
not break
Yes.
within the circle itself. Where do you
Mm-hmm.
think these codes come from? Where do you think this sort of behavior comes from?
That is where it starts to get deeper. And this is where I have to bring the history into it a little bit, Charles, is because this did not just happen, in my opinion, overnight. I tell people this, and I know Stanley is going to go crazy when he comes in, if he does, but this is where the argument for reparations, Charles, comes into play. When we look at the black codes historically, and I've talked about this before, when you trace the lineages, when you trace the communities of the South, a lot of the hoods are predominantly black, Charles. And if we trace their lineage, which has been done in studies, a lot of these people are descendants of slaves. And what's important about that is you have the understanding of how the black codes worked and the imprisonment, Charles, which is why I say today the hoods are a watered down version of the black codes where they incentivize crime and the government will take care of the people in that community to keep it going, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. Because there's a profit system in the prison system.
Hmm. So before we get, I think I'll keep this thing you just described now. I think it's a very important aspect of this conversation. I'd like to keep it
Mm-hmm.
for later. So let me ask you, as a young
Yeah.
man growing up in the hood, is there
Mm-hmm.
an option for you not to join the hood, or you must have to join a gang? What is it like?
Um, that is going to depend on your reputation. Like, if you don't know anybody and you're just passing through, now there is one misconception, and that is that there is not just people getting shot up every day all the time. You do have what is called a check in thing. Now, what checking in means, if you're going to come through this particular area, you need to let somebody know before you do it. And we do have kids that, get basically the gang will protect them. There's certain kids that want to get an education and they know the son's daddy's in jail, so they'll look out for this kid. It's really a roll of dice, Charles, based off the path that you choose and who you know.
Mm. So why is there so much violence? Why is violence a defining feature of hood culture, of hood behavior? Why is violence? Why is there so much violence, if I may say?
Due to the lack of due to the lack of basically economic activity. And what I mean by that is this. Now we need to look at history again real quick. The hood technically has been around longer than we think. I think it started in the late 50s, early 60s. Um, but Charles, where it comes in is during the whole migration period with the whites and the blacks, the middle class whites did not want to live around the poor blacks. So they said, we don't want them here. So they left. And the problem with that, Charles, is the economic activity left with the whites who left those areas. And ever since then, ever since that has happened, little by little, Detroit, other prominent black communities have been robbed of the economic activity and the crime has been pushed in, which is why I'm not gonna, it's hard for somebody to convince me that black people solely chose this. It was pushed upon them where Stanley gets it correct by the white supremacy system that America was founded on. It's all about the gentrification of the ADOS community, Charles, in my opinion.
Okay. So the violence. So if I get if I know anything at all, I get a sense that many of these so-called gang leaders are also drug peddlers, right? And they
Yes,
make a fortune from it. So I've
yes.
got to ask, if the hood is so poor, where do they make their fortune from? Do they sell outside the hood or do they sell within the community itself? Where do they make their money from?
Okay, now historically, we had the crack epidemic, which everybody knows about. Then I'm not going to go into the details, but there was a way to make it at a lot cheaper of a rate. And then we also got, hands on other drugs such as heroin, crocodile, and other drugs like that that were pushed in. And where the main source of the money comes from is that it has changed a little bit since then. It's not as easy to do now, but the welfare checks, when you used to cash them on the 14th and the 1st of every month, I believe is what it was, a lot of these people were already drug addicts. And we have something that I told you about, which is drug runners. This is our addicts who will do crimes for us in exchange for drugs. We get them hooked on drugs. They become a pawn for us to use to commit crimes or go through things that we need them to do in exchange for payment of said drugs.
So, in effect, it's government funding that is sustaining the activities of the hood. People get their paychecks from the government and then they spend it on drugs. Is
Now,
that what
some of
you
it,
say?
some of it, the other aspect of it comes into play where the people are living in stressful conditions. Like I said, most of the high paying jobs, Charles, you got to take a bus. A lot of these people don't even have cars because having a car in the hood, your car can get scrapped, it can get stolen, it can get shot up, and then you're out your money. So a lot of people just don't have cars because there's too much of a risk owning one. So they take a bus. Now, the people will travel to different cities, make their money, come back, and then the goal is to save money and eventually move out. But see, moving out of the area, Charles, is not the solution because what the government wants is they want these communities to kill themselves. Because once they do that, there's all this property that they can fix up and sell for a massive profit margin. It's taking time, but it's getting worse. And as far as it is half of it's on the government, the other half, Charles, is the culture, where it's incentivized to not do the right thing. That is where the terminology, you want to be white so bad and go to school, or oh, you ain't a real N word if you don't do this, or you ain't like your daddy, you ain't doing this or that. And the problem is, Charles, is that it's mostly the gang leaders that don't have good intentions for the kids that they recruit. They want these kids to go to jail and become institutionalized so that they can come in and out of jail and use them until this kid gets life.
So let's talk about the culture for a minute, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
What's the culture? What's hood culture? What are the features of hood culture? How does it
Now,
play out?
now you have two different forms. You have one for the men and you have one for the women. Now, the men join the game because they want a brotherhood, they want a family because a lot of these kids don't have a father. The girls join the games because they want to be protected and they want to have bragging rights to say that they are in this gang. Now, there's two ways. Number one, the boys get in, they get jumped in. The girls get in, they have to sleep with all the gang members. That's how it normally works. They basically get prostituted by the gangs to join them.
Mm,
And a lot of these girls, Charles, have self esteem issues and they're already, growing up without a father in the home. And they're looking for, that desperation to get that love that they haven't had. So they seek it from gangs, unfortunately, just like the boys. And that's where the culture is promoted in hip hop. That is the part of hip hop, in my opinion, that has degraded what the experience actually is and turned it into solely something negative.
mm. Wow. So this culture thing, people do all these terrible things to just fit in. Now, earlier you described that there are sections that are being controlled by um, certain gangs, right? If a gang is controlling a certain turf, and there are codes within the hood itself that you have to
Yes.
respect turf territory, right? In
Hmm.
my mind, I'm thinking many of them would respect those boundaries because they know the consequences are dire. So, how come there are frequent gang related violence where one gang shoots up another gang or where both gangs start fighting one another? What usually sparks those kinds of conflicts in the hood?
You got two things. One is when you lose clientele, meaning that that rival gang has a better product, aka drugs to sell. And number two is because it's a conquer agenda, Charles. Basically, if they see an opportunity to take out some of your people to get more control of an area, they'll do it. They'll
Mm,
send their pawns to go kill these people or, get them locked up with false charges, snitch on them, do whatever they got to do because it's all about gaining more control. The more area you control, Charles, the more money you make. Some of
mm,
these guys, Charles, that run these gangs, making 50, $60,000 a week.
mm. So it's all about expanding the frontiers of their territory,
Yes,
not
yes.
unlike what countries do. I mean, to. So
Why
is
do you
there
think,
like,
Charles? I call these gangs, I call them mini versions of the drug cartels in Mexico. They are
mm,
mini versions of that. The only difference is they're not as chaotic.
mm. So it seems like there is an internal logic to what they're doing, right? So
Yes,
they are controlling their territory. They want to expand their territory just like any business, right? They want to gain more money, more influence, more power, but
yes.
they use a lot of violence in carrying out, trying to meet those ends.
Hmm.
Wow, that's
And it's
interesting.
done that way, Charles, because people respond to fear and intimidation. And
Mm,
these guys know this, and that's why strength in numbers works so much. Because if you're by yourself and a rival gang pulls up on you, you're gonna do what they say, or you're gonna be smoked right there where you stand. And
wow.
you got to prove yourself, Charles. Like, and because I want to keep it specifically black for a moment, but I'm gonna bring this up. There was a white kid that grew up in my neighborhood, and he had to prove himself time and time again because we did not see him as black enough. He was always the white boy. So he ended up doing something horrendous, Charles, that got a life sentence. We used him as a pawn and destroyed his life.
So you have to prove yourself by doing certain extreme things. You have to prove your loyalty to the gang
Yes,
by doing
to the
certain
cause.
things,
Yes.
by preying on innocent people. Do they target innocent people in this, or do they look out for other gang members as well?
Now there is a brotherhood. Yes, we do look out. Well, I'm speaking past tense here because I don't mess with that stuff anymore. But there is a brotherhood among the community, and it's really all dependent on Charles, the gang member himself, because there's no penalty for doing something that you shouldn't do. For example, like some of them don't agree with kids beating on their grandma, beating on their moms, but then some of them don't care and they'll do it. It all depends on the individual in that circumstance because the more horrendous the crime, the more obedient you are to the agenda and the cause. The cause is not to help the community, it's to siphon off of it until every dollar is took.
Hmm. Okay, so Melinda said something when you talked about the culture, right? That part of the problem of the hood is related to the culture. And she said
Yeah.
that the culture is made up, that grandparents did not do that. So, what exactly do you think she's referring to? Is it that there was a certain point in American history where this culture began to develop, right? Or can this culture be traced back to the time of slavery, to the time of Jim Crow, or is it post the 1960s when the civil rights were passed and so many of these welfare
Okay.
programs came into place? So,
Now
historically,
here,
how is it?
yeah. Now Charles, here's where it's gonna get a little bit deeper. So, if there's any women listening, please do not get offended by this. But this is where the black women made a big mistake. And what I mean by this is very simple. Now, in 1934, we had the FHA. What that was is, hold on, I got it right here. Let me go back and look real quick. Is you had a program by FDR where basically they were trying to help the middle class whites, but they had rules in place where blacks could not live in certain areas, aka we know it as redlining. This was in the 30s and the 40s, arguably in the 20s and the early 1900s as well. But what that basically did, Charles, with the New Deal, is it helped the middle class whites, the poor whites, at the expense of the poor blacks. Now, up until that point, Charles, the black structure in the family was stronger than it ever was. And what happened is after that was passed in 1967, we had the civil rights, and then we had the Fair Housing Act, where that allowed blacks to purchase property in white areas. That was the beginning of the desegregation. Now, along with that came the Great Society Act. This is where I don't like LBJ, but he gave black women a choice. He said, you can take welfare and you can take child support. In exchange, the black man has to go. And that is where, Charles, the big mistake came in. Some black women took it, not all. I don't want to throw them all under the bus because that's not fair, but some of them did. And the ones that took it, Charles, are primarily the biggest ones that produce wedlock births. 70% of black births are in wedlock, and it's done by 18% of black men. This 18% of black men, Charles, is the guys in the hood. So, what does that tell
Hmm.
me, Charles? The black women that did this are getting with the black men, getting the child from them, and then the black man is thrown out of the house and she gets taken care of. That is the mistake, Charles, where things started to go south. It wasn't a mentality until about the 60s. And the rebellious mentality I'm talking about is the kids grow up without their father and they start questioning, where's daddy at? Where's he at? He's not here. And then these kids, they have this hatred, some of them, for their father because they don't understand why he's not there. Now, some of these dudes are deadbeats, of course, but
Hmm.
it's not so much the grandparents that made the mistake. It was the ones that came after them, the current parents that are in their 40s and 50s, 60s. Because, Charles, up until this point, the black family was strong. Now, less than 25% of black women are ever going to get married, and 60% of divorces are done by women. I think around 65% of that is black women. If I'm not mistaken, I have to look it up again. And there has never been an accountability by the black woman for that. And all they say is white supremacy. Now, Charles, if that's true, my question to the black women, why did you choose child support and welfare over your husband?
Hmm. So this is an interesting history that you've laid out for me. So
Mm-hmm.
I've got to ask, right?
Yes.
This welfare policy, right? It wasn't
Yes.
specifically saying it's only open to black women.
No,
It
of
was
course not.
open to women, right? So
Right.
how did it disproportionately affect black women? Why did black women take the government up on their offer while other groups were sensible enough to see the dangers in it? So What exactly happened there? What was going on
Now,
in the black
okay,
community and at the
Charles,
defiance of black women?
very great question. Now, here's the answer to that. Now, up until the end of, the during segregation and all that, the wages between blacks and whites were a lot. There's a big gap because of this. And what this is about, Charles, is now this applies to all women as well, but just to throw this out there, women could not have a bank account until the 1970s. Now, my theory on this is the reason that black women chose it is because the black man was not making enough to take care of his family. Charles, the houses that they wanted to buy were
Can't hear you, Wolf. Are you still there?
why some of them did it. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to be homeless. And if the government's going to step in and help you, then, you got to do what you got to do. But see,
Hmm.
Charles, here's the interesting part. Black men are getting with white women. White women are getting with black men. And what's interesting, Charles, is the marriage rates are higher among white men and black men and white women than they are black, black, white, white. How interesting is that?
Hmm. That's interesting. I mean, we're still going to talk about interracial
Yes.
dating. I just want
Hmm.
to tie up
Yeah,
a
of
few
course.
things. So it seems to me
Now,
that, you know, what the choices that these black women had to make were
yes.
choices of they were existential choices, right?
Hmm.
They were trying to survive in a harsh economic environment. Now,
Yes.
if this policy, as it was put forth, right, was disproportionately affecting people of low socioeconomic class, of which
Hmm.
black people were overrepresented in that. Um,
Yes.
can you really, put the blame on them and say, well, they just decided to kick the man out of the house? Weren't they making a sort of an economic calculation to say they were weighing the risk benefit analysis at least on the short term, right? You know, something might be good on the short term, but on the long term might be disastrous, right? So now let's go back to government role in
Hmm.
what happened to the hood today. Do you think
Hmm.
that those policies were designed specifically to have these effects, or do you think that these were unintended consequences of government action?
Now, it's about 50-50. Now, the policy itself had the right intentions, but it was not implemented the way it should have been. If Because when it was first passed out, because see, this is something else we got to bring up, is that welfare was not created for black people. It was originally for white women. So just to get that clear. But what I'm talking about, Charles, is the black women that did this, the ones that did choose this, they chose the government over their husband. And if we're going to say that, Charles, then I can make the same statement. Don't be mad at the black men today who date other races of women.
Mm, okay, so
It's a
I think
fair
this would be,
argument. I'm just saying.
yeah, this
But
would
Charles, one
kind
more
of be
point about this. One more
okay.
point, real quick,
Mm,
is I understand where Melinda's coming from, and she's correct about the grandparents, but the culture was designed due to the destruction of the nuclear family. And when the jobs and everything left and everything got chaotic and the boys formed the gangs, the Bloods and the Crips, the gangs were originally designed to protect the community against police brutality. Where it went south, Charles, is when you create an environment of desperation, it's going to breed crime at some point. The culture doesn't necessarily have to just happen overnight. It took a couple decades.
interesting. So you said something, you made a point about interracial marriages,
Hmm.
that the rates of marriage between black men and white women seems to be higher than even between black men and black women and white men and white women.
Yes.
What do you think is responsible for that? How are black men and white women striking this deal? What's the what's
Oh
responsible
boy.
for that?
Now, Charles, this is where it's going to be an opinion. I'm not going to be able to answer this with 100% fact. But what I think it comes down to is that there was a self hatred instilled in black people that has carried over generation after generation. And on top of it, there's this big divide between the black man and the black woman. And it's not that the black man wants the black woman to get on her hands and knees and apologize. But see, Charles, most of them will not even take accountability for what happened. The black family was stronger than it ever was before these policies were pushed through. And if we're gonna sit here and say black men ain't shit, oh, sorry for cussing, black men ain't this, black man ain't that, well, we need to understand why these black men have become this way. They don't have a stable house anymore. It's hard for a man to grow up without a father's influence and a mother's influence. They need both parents. And if the black women, don't want to work with the black man, we're gonna have to go somewhere else. I'm sorry.
So is this something about resenting the black woman? Is there some sort of resentment that the black man has against the black woman? That's why he's going for the white woman.
I do think there is to an extent because of that policy. Um, but other than that, Charles, this is something else that needs to be addressed. Is that you might see the black men that say they love, hoochie mamas and BBLs and all this and that, but they really don't. Most black men, 60% are middle class. They prefer a God fearing woman, a modest woman, a woman of faith, if you believe in that, stuff like that. And what they see, Charles, is a lot of these black women that live in these particular areas are looking up to role models such as Cardi B, Megan the Stallion, and very, very promiscuous, just women that do not have good um, upbringings, and they teach these women to do very bad things. That basically, in the eyes of a man, it doesn't make them look like potential partner material. And Charles, a lot of these women in the hood specifically will tell you that their role models are Beyonce, Rihanna, Megan Thee Stallion, and Cardi B. It's always one of them four. It's never Madam C.J. Walker. It's never anybody else.
So is it that they don't know any better? Is this what they are exposed to? Is this what they know? They don't know any better that, they could see other people as role models. Why is it that myopic that their role model has to be these sort of quote unquote degenerate women? What's happening there?
Um, well, what it comes down to is all right, sorry about that. What it comes down to, Charles, is it goes back to this because see, the destruction of the family, Charles, it also affected the black women too, not just the men. And what I mean by that is the women also grew up not knowing what a good man looked like, and they didn't get taught how to be a woman by their mothers. So what ended up happening from there is they started looking for outside influence. And Charles, this is where it comes back to the rap culture. Where do a lot of these guys in the streets go? One of three areas: entertainment, music, or athletes. And what do these guys promote? And that's what these women see. So we have to understand that as well. It's what happened, Charles, was not just detrimental to the black man in the 60s, it was detrimental to the black woman too. However, the black woman came out better in that situation than the black man did. That is why the incarceration rates among black men are higher than any other race.
So it seems to me that these black women are a product of their environment. This
Yes,
is what they grew up with. This is the life
correct.
they understand, and they think that this is all that there is to life, right? So
Hmm.
this will lead me to, the what solutions do you think can be preferred? what can be done to change the mentality and the culture in the hood such that people don't see these negative, degenerate things as a way of life? They can look
Yeah.
forward to much more positive things. What do you think that people can do?
Well, the first thing is that the schools need to improve. The schools are really run down. The books are outdated in a lot of cases, and the education is not really incentivized anymore. And an undereducated population does not necessarily mean a good outcome. And the high school dropout rate among blacks is almost 20% in this country. That means one in every five is not going to graduate high school. Now, we can make the argument, well, there's successful people who didn't graduate high school. Well, how many of those people are black is my question. And what I mean by this is we have to take out the rappers, the athletes, and the entertainers because that is the minority in the black community. Meaning, yes, you can become a rapper or a basketball player without an education, but do you have the skills for that? And a lot of blacks do not. And without the education, Charles, that's why this stuff is promoted because we're not taught about, safe sex. None of this stuff is promoted. It's just do what you want. And basically, once you get pregnant, the government will be there to pick up the tab and just keep the black man out the house and we'll take care of you. It's a perpetuated cycle that hasn't been addressed since the 60s when it started.
So I've got to ask, right? If you're
Hmm.
saying poor education is a part of the
Yes.
problem, what is
Hmm.
responsible for the state of education in the hood? Is it funds? Is it quality of teachers? Is it policy? What
Well,
exactly is making the education so bad?
part of it comes down to test scores as well. And to use a reference really quick, and it's a true story. To watch the movie, it's a movie called Coach Carter by Samuel L. Jackson. It's based on a true story. Now that's why I'm gonna use it. Is the school that these kids played at, which was in California, most of the blacks weren't even getting above a C on the test. And how education departments work is it's based off academic performance. The better a school does, the more money they get. The lesser they do, the less funding they get. And without good teachers, therefore, all the good teachers are going to gravitate to higher paid education and, excuse me, higher education paid spots, which, that's good for them because you can't tell them you got to go to this school and make $40,000 a year or you can go teach here and make 80. Of course, they're going to take the 80. But it's the policy of how the education department works and basically the fact that these books, like Charles, I was using textbooks that were from the 70s. And this was in the early 2000s. So that goes to tell you the books are outdated, and it's because they're not funded. Because without the test scores to back the funding, they're not going to give these schools more money.
Hmm. So, talking about funding being linked to performance, I would
Hmm.
ask this question. What
Yeah.
exactly are the school administrators doing? I mean, if you want to look at it from a business model, right?
Right.
Those who are running a company, if they
Hmm.
know that part of the criteria for them getting funds from the government is if their students are performing better, right? Wouldn't they put the effort into that to make sure that they turn out quality students that will assure funding? So it seems illogical to me that this is still being perpetuated given the negative consequences of poor black scores.
Well,
What are the school administrators doing? What exactly is happening?
now see, Charles, here's where it balances out. See, the reason that these administrators will let it slide is because you might have a basketball team, for example, that is not doing well academically, but if they're extremely athletic and they can draw in a crowd to buy tickets, it's worth the offset to them to let it slide in exchange for the revenue that they can make by having the next potential Michael Jordan playing at their school. They offset it by ticket sales and by having star athletes.
But that means funds are coming to the school anyway. So if those
Yes.
funds from the ticket sales are coming into the school, how come they
Hmm.
don't use it to improve the conditions of the school? How come they don't use it to upgrade the books or upgrade the curriculum or get better teachers? What's happening?
That is where you have poorly run administrations, and there's no money in education because the dropout rate is so high that a lot of these kids don't even make it past the 10th grade.
No, no, but you
And
said, just
yeah.
sorry, before I forget,
Hmm.
you said that the funds that they're not getting from the government is offset by them
Yes.
having a good team, a good sports team that
Yes.
they can leverage on to get
Hmm.
ticket sales. So that's revenue coming to the school, right? So if that revenue is coming into the school, what is it being used for? Do they just pour it back into sports and neglect other areas of the school?
That's part of it. And the other part, Charles, is that they get paid more money. If you have a star athlete, you get college scouts that come to your community. There's a lot of stuff. And Charles, you got to understand that some of these people know that education is not what this school is for. That is why you see schools like Alabama, for example, that have some of the most highest rates in terms of pro sports drafts, but the schools are not the best academically.
Yeah, but I'm still trying. It's still not clear to me that if
Okay.
funds
All
were
right.
a problem, right? If funds
Hmm.
were a problem,
Yes.
they can't upgrade their schools, they can't upgrade their curriculum, they can't upgrade their books, they can't pay teachers very well to retain teachers, retain quality teachers. But then
Hmm.
they're getting money, handsome money from sports, from ticket
Yes.
sales, from maybe sponsorship deals. That's
Hmm.
money coming in. What are they doing with those funds?
You
Why are
mean the
they not
funds from the
why
sports, correct?
exactly. So why are they not pouring it into the schools to make it better? So at least they can also get funds from the government as well. It's a win-win for them. They can, I mean, all not all their students are going to be star athletes, right? So they
Right.
can be getting funds from the star athletes while using that funds to invest in the school to train other students who will be getting the high scores that would attract more funds from the government. So I don't see how is that not happening. What are the funds being used for?
Okay. Now, here's where you got to understand this is that the sports director of a specific school is not the director of the school.
Can't hear you, Wolf. You're off, Wolf. I can't hear you. Okay, so there are a couple of um, comments here that I just want to take before
Okay.
Wolf comes back.
And that
Um,
school, can you hear me?
yeah, I can hear you now.
Ah,
You put up for a while.
okay. It cut out. Sorry about that. But
Mm,
the school, for example, what I just said to repeat it, is the sports director, I think at Richmond was making almost $80,000 a year, if I'm not
mhm.
mistaken. It could be a little bit less. It was more than the teachers, I know that, but he had two or three kids that went to play NCAA football at North Carolina. And we had a NBA player come from our state too, Ralph Sampson. And he pulled a lot of money in for the schools in Virginia, especially the high school he played at. I think I can't remember where he played in high school, but and the money, Charles, gets funneled to the sports department because it's not about the education. The education gets offset to the women because the women are getting higher grades than the men, which is why a lot more women are going to college these days than men. You see where I'm going with this? There's an incentive to use the sports by the men to make the money, and some of that money gets siphoned to the sports teams and it goes to the teachers to teach the women. The kids, the boys, for example, most of these kids are not going to graduate high school. They're going to try to go play pro sports.
So if I get in my mind, I don't see funds as a problem here because there are sources of funds, right? I just think it's a matter of priority, right?
Yes.
So if the girls are graduating with good grades, it
Hmm.
shows because they're not going to be separating the classes and not teaching the boys anyway. They're going to be teaching those boys who are interested in learning, right?
Yes.
So what's happening that a majority of boys are not even interested in learning? They want to go play basketball.
And that, Charles, is where it starts to get into the dicey waters because if you are a quality sports athlete, unless you intend to go to the NCAA, which a lot of kids do, they only make the grades required to get drafted to the NCAA. Once they get there, that's why the one and done rule started because a lot of these kids were not academically fit, and they said go play 1 year of college and then we'll draft you. The boys that
Yes.
were successful
Yes, true. But the boys that will be successful in this venture might represent a tiny portion of the total number of boys in the school. So, how are most of the boys following this pattern when they know that it's only a
some of
few
these
people
women
that would be
do go
successful
to
at that
college.
venture?
Yes, but Charles, where it gets confusing is this: some of these girls make it, but the ones that do, you don't hear about it because it's not seen as normal. Because as a black woman, you're supposed to get with this guy or you're supposed to be with the star football player. You're not supposed to go get your education. In the hood, that's seen as coon behavior. And that's where Ogie makes a good point. Some of it is culture related, yes, but you have to address how it started and you have to understand how the insider workings work. If you have a school that's good for sports, that's where the money goes. It doesn't go towards education. If you have a school for education, the sports department lacks.
Okay, so let me bring in some input from Stanley, right? So he says
Hmm.
that schools are run by tax base, not by ticket sales. How would you respond to that?
Depends because once again, the taxes are going to the state, and then the state distributes the fund based off academic performance. You, as a taxpayer, have no say where the money goes to the school. You pay the taxes, the state distributes it based off academic performance, and the ticket
Mhm.
sales are ran by the school. The ticket sales, the money goes to the school. They invest the money where they see fit. Like I said, I didn't see the financial report, so I'd have to go look. But I do know for a fact that our coach was making way more money than the teachers were.
Mm. So Stanley still says he said that public high schools are not funded by sport teams. Colleges are a different animal. This is being conflated. So is it possible that it's colleges that run this sports model, while high schools are usually funded by by taxpayers?
Yes, public schools. We got to make the distinction here because some people start tying in private schools and charter schools. That's different. I'm only talking about public schools.
Mm.
And again, Stanley, you're missing my point. The ticket sales, a lot of these schools that rely on ticket sales, for example, you can go look into this where the story went down. Coach Carter, the guy that was running the sports team, was making more money than the teachers were because there was more money to be made in having NBA potential draft picks than there was the education department. And unfortunately, some of it is culture based. Yes, the boys don't care about the grades if they're playing sports in a lot of cases because they already grew up in bad conditions. They're focused on trying to get to the league.
Wow, this is very, very interesting and intricate. And I mean,
It gets deep, Charles.
I don't know.
Charles,
It's
okay, to summarize it for you, how the
mm,
school system works for the men in the hood is different than the women.
mm.
In the hood, for the men, it's more sports driven. For the women, it's education driven. But no matter what you do, once again, like I said, you'll see other girls call each other coons for getting their education because you're not supposed to go do this. You're supposed to go latch on to this future NBA star.
So it goes back to the culture in essence.
Yes, part of it, yes.
So it's the culture is what informs the priorities of the people, which in
Some of it,
turn
yes,
affects
but
the
once again,
household.
Charles, is that we have to understand why the culture was built. See, this culture does exist in other communities, like the white community, for example, but it's not as prominent yet. It's starting to increase. And where I can tie this in is we can take hip hop, for example. And I'm going to make this very brief because I don't want to get off the black part. We can take Eminem, for example. Eminem, the white boy that rapped, has started creating this culture of white boys that don't want to graduate high school. They want to go play ball or they want to go rap. And then what's happening? The same thing with the women, where the women are saying, well, wait a minute. I can just have kids with this man and I can get on the same programs that the black women took in the 60s. And it's increasing, Charles. That's why the poverty rate in the white community is increasing. The single parent household is increasing. And you're seeing a lot more white dudes that want to be like black women, that want to copy the culture, as we call it, culture vultures. But I don't say
Mm,
that because, I mean, but black culture, what we need to understand, you have to take the good and the bad that comes with it. And our culture influences everybody else's, something
mm.
that people don't understand. See, that is why we need to learn accountability for ourselves to an extent and take accountability where it's due. And I think what needs to happen is the black man and the black woman need to sit down and talk about this and not yell at each other and call each other names. Have an honest conversation because education before this, Charles, was valued more, courtesy to Bob Woodson. You brought him on your show, where the academic scores were higher before all this stuff started. Education is no longer prioritized in the hood because it's not seen as sustainable.
Okay, so Wolf, I know I said we're going to do this stream is going to be talking about the hood and talking about interracial
Mhm.
dating. I'm afraid we would have to move the interracial dating to another time because I think that there is a lot to be covered here, right? So I want to bring in SKC and Stanley. I think
Yeah.
they are in different points on this matter.
Mhm.
So I want to understand where they're coming from, and it would
Yeah, for
only
sure.
be fair and it only make more sense if they can call in. So SKC, Stanley, please call in. I can see both of you are having some sorts of disagreements with
Yeah.
what Wolf is saying. Let's have a chat, a respectful chat. No
Uh,
talking over the person, right?
yeah.
Lay your points and let's
Charles, one more quick point. Can I make this real quick? Is you're
yes,
going to
go.
find this interesting too, Charles, that black men are starting to marry black women again, but it ain't black American women. It's women that are coming here from Africa. And you know what that
Mm,
is? It's the black women that were not exposed to the bad culture that is being pushed on black women these days by these
mm,
role models.
mm.
Very interesting.
All right. So Stanley and SKC are on the stream. Welcome, Stanley. Welcome, SKC. So Stanley,
Hey
let's
there.
hear from you. You had a disagreement on Wolf
Well,
as
no,
regards.
it's not just a disagreement. It's we don't have enough time. I posted a history of the welfare state in on the channel. I'll just suggest that if anybody's curious about the history of it, just
Mm,
start with it because I there's just not enough time. To the point about the government presenting a choice to black women, there was no choice. I would agree. I would agree that the way the welfare state was structured, it excluded black men from the home. I agree with that 100%. It wasn't a choice that black women made. It was a choice that the government made. They followed rules. The choice was get welfare or don't get welfare. The government didn't, the rules said no man in the house. And Appalachia has as many problems, though not quite the violence, but People aren't stacked up on each other in Appalachia, but there is high crime in Appalachia. There is a problem with single motherhood, and they use the same welfare system. So, there's some details there that kind of got glossed over. Um, schools. Schools, your regular public school is funded by property taxes. They do get money from the federal government. They do get some money from the state, but the primary funding for public schools, straight public schools, is property taxes. That's why schools in upper class white neighborhoods get better equipped, better books, better teachers, etc., versus inner city schools. Athletics can have something to do with it, but most schools aren't Dunbar High in DC. Those schools are just kind of normal schools, and the athletics um, don't contribute a heck of a lot of money. Most high school coaches don't make much more than regular teachers do, and I know this because uh, my brother-in-law used to be a high school coach in Georgia. So athletics generally have nothing to do with buying books or getting better teachers or anything like that in high school. In college, it is a totally different story. There are schools like big football schools where the biggest money maker will be a University of Georgia football team or University of Alabama football team. But high schools and colleges, as far as funding goes, they are on different planets. No, no similarities in the funding. So that's pretty much everything. I have more to add, but I just don't have time to do it. There's some holes in the history of welfare, and there are several good books. I know Fred probably has more books on it than I do because he tends to know more about that stuff. I just know like kind of like a college textbook sort of history.
Okay, so before SKC goes in, I need you to expand a point that you made. You made a point that the sorts of problems that you find in the black community is also also found with the white community in Appalachia, but you
Yes.
made a distinction that not quite as violent. So, what on the
Well, the
times that
thing is there's a lot more room. I mean, I've made the joke to you that Appalachia is a ghetto with fresh air. It's people don't live in like government housing. There are a lot more single family homes in Appalachia, even if they're just kind of like shotgun shacks. You might be poor, but you're not going to live in close proximity to your neighbor. And I know this from personal experience. So there are a lot of single mothers in Appalachia. They just don't have the same sort of living conditions, but the poverty problems are still there.
Hmm. So you think it's a density problem? I
Well,
mean,
no, I don't think I know. I'm not guessing.
okay, so you're not guessing. You believe it's a density
Nope.
problem. You're saying it's a
I
density
know
problem,
it's a density problem.
or you know it's a density problem. Okay,
Well,
that's
yeah.
fine. Okay, that's fine. I mean, there have been studies that show that when, for example, there were studies done on rats that when rats were placed in very closed, confined quarters, right, that they became very violent with each other and started attacking each other. So it's possible that high density areas can lead to high stress, which can lead to violence and all those things. So I'm willing to give that theory a try, and I'm open-minded
Well, it's
enough
not a
to.
theory. I mean, I can get your references if, I can do that offline. It's not hard to find.
All right, so I'm willing to give that quote and unquote fact a try. So SKC, welcome to the conversation. Jump right in. Where would you like to start?
Yeah, I mean, there's different parts that I agree with from Wolf and Stanley. Some other parts that I disagree with. I'm with you, Charles, on the idea of it being such a minute amount of boys who could go into sports that it's such a small percentage that um, that possibly can't tell the full story. Just as an overview, there's 450 players in the NBA. There's about 1,700 players in the NFL. Together, that's about 2,100 players. Even if you did that times 10, let's say like minor leagues underneath those leagues, and you said, okay, let's just do that times 10, you're talking about 20,000 players tops. That just scratches the surface of the total Black American population, which is what 40, somewhere between 43 and 45 million. So it's like, come on, that possibly can't be the full story on that. Um, I agree with Stanley on the idea um, that the property taxes funds the schools. That's one of their largest money makers, along with the federal government. How would I say so? Because I help pay it with my own property taxes that I see every year. Uh, and then, of course, I do disagree with Stanley about well, our long thing about culture. I think Wolf is right on that. That the culture plays a significant amount of the reason why you have a lot of these issues. Um, I would say another thing that I do disagree with Wolf about was education being championed. I think it's the reverse. Well, partially in the community, education is championed for Black girls, not for Black boys. That's
Mm,
where they get that phrase.
that's what
That's
Wolf
where.
said.
Oh, okay. Well, that's where they get that phrase "strong, independent, and don't need no man." That's centered around going and getting an education and being basically um, not beholden to anyone. Um, and of course, the boys, if they take that route, they're called coons or square or wanting to be white and all of that type of stuff.
Okay, so if the girls are being encouraged to go to schools, how come they still see the Cardi B's and the Rihannas as role models? How come they're not looking beyond celebrities as role models?
Uh,
Something
because they see because they see it all as one subset. It's all mixed in together. It's not separated. They believe that um, you can have elements of the lower society thought process and be educated. It's one of the reasons why a lot of times when you go into certain let's say if you were to look at like at a Roland Martin show, um, everybody on those shows are going to be degreed individuals. Some of the women are going to be double degreed, but they're going to speak like a female rapper because that's what they believe that is part of the experience of being authentically Black because that's what the culture teaches them.
hmm,
Well, I don't
because
think it's black culture that teaches them that. I think it's American culture.
That teaches them that they have to speak in
Yes.
with a
How
lot of
many? Yes. How
so
many white people did you hear say that Obama wasn't authentically black?
so
oh no okay.
I'm going to ask you this question, Stanley, since you keep saying it's American culture, right? Uh,
Okay,
do you
well, we
find,
do live in America, last I checked.
yes, yes, you do live in America. I'm not disputing that. If you do say it's American culture, can you give me examples of that uh, same sorts of behavior in other communities in America, right?
What sort of behavior?
The sort of
You mean
behaviors
their
we are
own
talking about,
unique behavior or talking like black people?
the sort of behavior that SKC highlighted, the sort of
Eminem,
behavior
Vanilla
in
Ice. I mean,
America.
there are all kinds of.
Yeah, but regular white
I mean, if
folks
you
don't talk
go,
like that.
I mean, there are a lot of white kids who it's called cultural appropriation. It happens all the time.
But the thing is, most white folks don't talk like that.
Well, frankly, most black folks don't talk like that.
Well, possibly. SKC
Well,
has
no,
Well,
that
let
dude,
me
respect.
dude, I live here.
well hold on, Charles.
Yeah,
Let me
you
add
live
something right
there.
quick.
All right, go on ahead, Wolf.
I agree. That's one part I'm glad Stanley corrected that in SKC. I forgot about the property tax part. I'm glad y'all brought that up. I think the lottery also plays a part in some of the money from
Yes,
the lotteries go to the
it
schools,
does.
if I'm not mistaken. And the only
And
thing I'm
college
gonna
scholarships.
and again, like Stanley, see, this is where I disagree with you. Is like I've only talked to SKC just now, but Stanley, we got to accept the good with the bad. I don't see white Megan Thee Stallions out here or white Cardi B saying, go run that N word's pockets and take all his money. I just don't see it. Where are these white women at to do this?
Well, I think there are a lot of imitators. There are a lot of would be's.
But can you name a couple? Because the only ones I see
Well,
promoting
here,
this,
here. Oh, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and give you that point because I don't keep up with young culture these days.
and
So
Stanley, here's the danger.
you're more an expert on that than me. But let me
See,
ask you
Stan,
a quick question. Most black people don't talk that way either.
well, and I've addressed that before, but see, here's the thing. Even Jay-Z himself said he gonna teach his daughter how to run an N-word's pockets.
You
And
know
see,
what though? You know what though? I ain't raising my son to be like Jay Z.
and that's the good part. And that's why I told you before, Charles, on another stream, that's why we have a saying in America, everybody who's black is black, but not everybody's an N-word. You see where this is going now?
Well, I think
Yeah.
I think there's one thing that and I'll throw this out here. Wolf,
Mm-hmm.
we know if we look at the data, the
Yeah,
when it comes to reading and math or proficiency, it does not look good in Black America.
100%.
Okay,
But it
but
never
at the
has.
same, okay, and that's fine. That's fine. Uh,
It's not a recent
that
phenomenon.
that okay, but that's not my
It's
argument.
always no. It has
But that's
always been that way.
Stanley,
It's
please let
not
him
right,
get
new.
his point.
right.
Let
Whether it's new or not, that's not my argument.
Okay,
What I'm
then
saying
why are
is,
we concerned all of a sudden about stats? It's
Hold on, though,
never.
Stanley.
well, I
I
have to
want to, I
complete
want to
my
know where he's
argument.
going. So go ahead,
Okay.
SK. I want to hear this. Go ahead.
All right. However,
Mm-hmm.
from your experience, Wolf, from you stated that you kind of knew the ins and outs of people that had more of a street mentality and so forth.
Yeah.
Out of all of those people, who of them, what would you say would be the percentage of them who could recite rap lyrics and
Oh,
made life decisions based upon what they heard on songs?
Okay. Now I can answer that, SK. See, I see where you're going, but here's where I'm gonna correct one thing. Is yes, I would say 99.99% of them could recite the rap lyrics, but the guys who run these trap houses are very, very good at math, and they're very, very good at philosophy and planning. So that's why the old saying goes, some of your best accountants were former drug dealers.
Yeah, and what I was leaning towards is this: a lot of times you'll have young kids, and when I say that, I'm talking about from let's say toddler age on up until their late teens,
Yeah.
who they have learned or they make decisions more so on the oral traditions that they learn in rap than they
Hmm.
do from what they have learned in school.
I would agree with that to an extent. Now, here's where we got to get this correction though too. The rap music we hear today is not the same as what it used to be. That is why I tell people that the N word does not carry the same weight that it used to, because the N word used to be about the struggle of a black man making his way, but now it's
Right.
about violence.
But
And that's where it's gotten off the rails.
I want to ask SKC and go back. I don't really get your point about kids planning their lives around rap lyrics. What's your point?
My point would be just as when Charles starts his programs, he usually states that he tries to test the logical consistency of topics and people's in their positions.
Uh-huh.
And but however, if you're having kids that are making quotes, and I'm just going from my own experience, I'm pretty sure that Wolf can state this. How many times, Wolf, have you heard someone
Okay, wait, hold
make
on.
it try to make a decision and
It was my
they say,
question to you. May I finish my line of questioning?
Stanley, please let him make his point. Then you can ask afterwards. Thank you.
what I'm saying is they literally will quote the lines of a rapper as if it is they're quoting a philosopher. I'm gonna do this.
Okay.
It's just like so and so said. Am I lying, Wolf?
Oh, for goodness sake.
About you talking about a
So,
specific lyric?
uh, how
No,
do
I'm
you
just saying
know?
somebody is making a statement about it could be something that has to do with real life. They are, I'm gonna do this.
Oh,
Just like so and so said, just like Jay Z
okay,
said, just like
I'm
Pac
gonna.
said. And it's like this is just normal
Okay,
speech.
well, how do you know that's all they know? Just because they quote a rap lyric, how do you know that's all they know?
I'm not saying that that's all that they
Well,
know.
it sounds like you are saying that.
No, no. What I'm saying is that it's quite dangerous for someone to quote from entertainment for life decisions.
Okay, how do you know that they're doing it? Give me an example of someone who's basing their life on rap music.
Um, have you not heard?
Dude, I have a
Okay,
16-year-old and I know several 16-year-olds. I've yet to encounter somebody basing their day-to-day decisions on rap lyrics.
there's a little quote that says "hip hop is life."
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, that's a quote. There are millions of quotes. How do you know that black kids are planning their lives around rap lyrics?
Because you have kids that are being prosecuted based upon the lyrics that they have put in the songs, stating the various things that they
Well,
were doing.
no, yeah,
Okay,
but
so
they're actual rappers, are they not?
I have a question for
Well,
Stanley, right?
okay, hold
So
on. I gotta tie this in, Charles, real quick if I can. We'll take a
okay,
prime example right now, and I'm glad you brought this up, SKC. Let's take Ja Morant, for example. This brother got caught with a gun twice. He still wants to be a gangster, but he's got a $230 million contract with the NBA. And you have black kids saying that he is a real N-word and let that brother play. Now, what does that
Okay,
mean?
but
I don't know.
that doesn't mean they're planning their lives. They're commenting on John Morant.
But are they,
Stanley,
Stanley? Because notice what they said. He's a real N word. What does that mean
Okay,
exactly?
okay, maybe I'm missing something, but someone saying that about John Morant doesn't mean that they're planning their lives around John Morant being a real N word. You guys are making huge leaps here, and I've yet to find a concrete example of what you're saying is happening because I've
Sure,
never witnessed
there
it.
Sure, there's a lot of
Just because people
non-rapping.
say something doesn't mean they're living it.
Okay, there's a lot of non what you would say rappers that they're just kids, and they have a statement called catching bodies. Do
Yep.
you know what that means?
No, I have no idea.
Okay, that means they're murdering people.
Yep.
Okay,
And
well,
and that's a common statement in
okay,
rap.
okay. Let me ask you a question. Are most black kids doing that, living that philosophy? Because I'm not saying no one is, I'm not saying no kids are doing it. I'm saying it's not that common an experience, at least in my experience.
Okay, Stanley. So let me say I agree with your position that most black kids are not doing that, right? So how would you explain the black community, right? How would you explain the school performance? How would you explain the test scores? How would you explain the being suspended from schools at a higher
Mhm.
rate? How would you explain the high rates of incarceration? How would you explain the high rates of violence and crime in black communities? How
I
would you
would say
explain
that it
all this?
has it. I would say it is an ongoing problem that has been going on for generations that is yet to be solved, and I will admit that it's getting worse. But
Yeah,
it's not a new problem.
we're not saying it's a new problem.
Okay, well,
We're not
maybe
saying
I'm
it's
not
not.
getting my point across. I'm saying it's a historical problem. It started pretty much who knows how many 100 years ago. I'll just pull a number. Black kids have never done as well as white kids. I'm not sure. All I'm saying is that this isn't a new problem. It's been going on for 100 years.
The
I
question
can
is why.
say I think that there have been historical obstacles that have not been overcome.
So essentially, you think that the problem started with historical obstacles, right? And
I will look at the wealth gap. I will look at the income gap, and we can start there.
so, are you trying to tell me that everything or most things are hinged upon wealth and income in America?
There are a lot of people who will tell you that. I don't think that it is a 100% magic bullet, but I can tell you statistically that higher income kids have better outcomes than lower income kids. And that's
Okay.
regardless of race.
So, there are
I
some
mean,
drug dealers.
yes.
There are some drug dealers who are making thousands of dollars per year, right? Thousands,
Hmm.
hundreds of thousands of dollars every year.
Hmm.
It doesn't affect the outcome of their kids or their family members. They continue in that same path.
Well,
If
how do
it's a
you know?
choice, how do I know?
Yes.
Well, I've spoken with Wolf, and he
Okay,
has
well,
experience
I'm talking,
living in that
I'm
kind
not,
of
that's
environment.
anecdotal. You're
Well,
speaking like you have statistical evidence.
yours is anecdotal as well. Some of the things you've said is
I
anecdotal.
My anecdote is that most black kids don't have drug dealers as parents. I don't
How do
need
you
data to tell me that.
why
You're
don't you need data to tell you that?
most of anybody, uh, most black people are not drug dealers.
Yeah,
Most black
most
people don't
most
live in the inner city. Most
true,
black kids are not failing out of schools. I mean, you can go to statistics.
Well,
true.
Charles, can I ask SKC a question real quick so I can get a context?
Yeah,
Because I want to
before
see
Fuser
how
will come in.
SKC is you there, brother?
Yeah.
What do you mind telling me what hood did you grow up in? Like what
Oh, I
city?
did not grow up in the hood.
Oh, okay, I thought you did because you know quite a bit about it.
Well, we own property in the quote
Okay,
unquote hood. Yeah.
okay. Um, and see now you brought up the part about the bodies, but you also Charles, thing y'all ever heard the terminology? Do you want to catch a dirt nap?
Let's see
Yeah,
here.
that's
Pop.
actually fairly common.
Hmm.
Yeah.
But I mean,
So
I've heard that on cowboy movies.
uh, okay, I guess you could argue that, but I'm just saying is
Well, no,
I
I
see,
watched a lot of cowboy movies growing up.
but see, here's
The
the part,
the
Stanley. We got to understand. Oh, sorry,
but
somebody was going to go ahead.
no, real quick, black boys aren't watching cowboy movies like that, so they had to have gotten it from
They
somewhere
did when
else.
I was a kid. I'm old.
Now I feel it. I feel it, man. I know it's a different time, but times have changed. Like a lot of the hustle, like when you talk about hip hop, right? The whole hustle culture, the get the bag culture, and all that stuff. That's all embedded in hip hop. Now you could say you could question whether that's a positive or negative thing because that's kind of a two-sided. There's scammers and whatever all that, but a lot of that comes from hip hop.
Yeah,
That that
hustle
that the
culture.
kids are losing, that the kids are using, and I know hustling has always been around, but hip hop has further amplified everybody's willingness or attempts to hustle their way out of uh, whatever struggle they're in, regardless of
Yep.
whatever that hustle may be. Um,
But let me put this in though. I don't it I think you could say that it is worse in 2023 than it was say in 1963. I could live with that. But hustle culture has always been a part of black culture going all the way back to slavery days.
Wait, Stanley. So there is a black culture.
There's a black subculture, yeah.
Okay, so what are the features of a black culture in America?
All the standard features that you know of. We tend to be quote more soulful. Okay, but I think that black culture, as separate from say African culture, as separate from Afro Latino culture, it is unique to American culture.
What is black
You're not
subculture?
gonna find black
What
American culture in Brazil.
what is black subculture in America apart from it being soulful? As in, what
Well,
are the
it's the
other features?
culture that's unique to black communities.
All right. Now,
That's a
now we're gonna
secular.
get into the duality because
That's a
at
Oh yeah,
first
yeah,
secular.
it,
absolutely.
it
No, I 100%
That's a
ooh,
agree with
secular
you,
perspective.
SKC. I agree 100%. There is a duality. Absolutely.
But my question still remains, which you haven't answered. What is black
Okay,
culture?
I've answered the
Because
question. You're not accepting the answer. Black culture, as distinct from white culture, tends to be unique to black culture. We like
very,
spicier
very
foods.
secular.
We tend to like different types of foods. We're not doing haute cuisine. We're doing simple stuff like barbecue and collard greens and all that sort of stuff. We tend to talk rhythmically. We tend to be better at rhythm in general. We tend to be more lyrical. But
we
those
are
are
we are a
things,
musical people.
right? But those are things, the American branch of it, jazz, for instance, unique to American culture, started in American culture. It is a branch of American culture. It was started by black people, but take someone like Duke Ellington. Duke Ellington had a very specific um, black sound, if you want to call it that, but he used European methods. A lot of it is taking European methods, European foods, European cooking techniques, European dress, European this, European that, and adapting it to our own particular needs. That is black culture. We
Okay,
take
so
European
can
stuff
you
because that's what we had growing up in America over the centuries, and we've adapted it to our own needs.
okay, so can you I think you've given some features of what black culture is. Is there also a white
Well,
subculture, and what are some of the features of a white subculture in America?
Well, I mean, you could call it the mother culture of America that all the other cultures have pretty much adapted or branched off from.
Okay, features.
Speaking English would be one. We speak our own particular brand of English, as do Hispanics. I mean, I would say speaking English would be probably the first thing that would pop to mind.
But not the only thing.
Well, not the only thing, but it's the one that pops to mind. And I think we could start there. English people, they're descendants of English and other Europeans, but primarily English. We speak English as, kind of like the thing we speak in America. And other cultures have branched off. There's Black English, there's Spanglish, etc.
So, aside from speaking English, I mean, you were able to name like six, seven things that were unique to Black culture. I mean, if you could give me
I
like
would think
five,
I would think there's almost nothing that I I think that white culture tends to be based on the Enlightenment, which is basically Scottish, French, and English and German to a certain extent. It's basically an outlook or way you approach other people. It's how you approach. It's it's basically a way of living. That's culture, and it
yeah,
tends to be
culture is a way of
based
living.
on the Enlightenment, which is basically a worship of reason. But then there's heavy religious influences in there also.
So essentially, you're saying white culture, features of white culture means speaking in the English language, reason, and what was the third one? The
Well,
religion,
I won't say reason, I will say worship of reason.
worship of reason, and
Yes.
religion. So these are the aspects of what it means to
I would say
white
those
culture.
are three of the major ones. I'm sure that's debatable.
Okay,
I'm
that's
I'm curious on just that statement really quick. What do you mean by the worship of reason?
I mean, literally, like libertarians, for instance, they worship, say the John Locke's of the world. They worship the Thomas Jeffersons of the world. They are very into property, which is basically like John Locke's main claim to fame is the elevation of property as basically the cornerstone of of well capitalism and modern Western culture in and of itself. Our politics, the United States, the Constitution basically the very cornerstone of American economics, socioeconomics is property rights. Everything spins off from property rights. So when I say worship of reason, um, that's kind of like saying worship of the Enlightenment. And I would say maybe I'm going a little too far here, but a worship of property and individuality. Individuality and property are probably the two things. I said English. When I say worship of reason, property, that sort of thing, all figures into Enlightenment
Well,
thinking.
Stanley, you left off one thing too. We got to bring this up,
Cool.
Charles. Is that black men make some of the best fathers statistically? That's something else
I
they don't
agree
talk
with that.
about, but it gets
Yeah,
overshadowed because they single in on the hood where the black man ain't in the house. But
and,
statistically
and
speaking,
Yeah, and I
so.
would
so
throw in
quick,
individuality as part of that worship of reason.
yeah.
I think a distinctive feature of, say, black fatherhood, a good black father is not going to be worshiping individuality.
Okay, so I think I'm able to parse something from Stanley's response as regards to American culture, right? And
Mhm.
it seems like everything he said about both America, black and white culture in America seems almost positive to neutral, right? it seems like there were no aspects to American culture that we can highlight as being negative. So is that what is obtainable in America? Everything is all rosy and shiny, and
Well, no, 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 no. I mean, the other thing, since we're talking of the Enlightenment, and my personal philosophy is moderation in all things. Okay, if you take individualism to the extreme, you will get like far right politics. You will get authoritarianism. In my, weak, feeble brain, taking anything too far is a weakness.
okay, so that is a way in which white culture can go wrong, taking
Well, black
individualism too
culture
far.
can too. Any culture can go too
In
far
what ways
with
has
too much of a
in what
good thing
ways
is bad.
in what ways has black culture gone wrong in America today?
I think that we tend to. I think this is going to be controversial to say, but I think, I think, and I actually find it actually kind of a good thing. But I think that black people know white people too well. We are not going to, and I'm really going to just speak for me. I'm not going to 100% trust that, assimilating into white culture and pulling up my pants is going to be the thing that saves the black community.
I
I
say the
don't
complete
think I
opposite. I don't think that black people know white people at all.
I don't think so either. I don't think
I,
so.
I think
Mm.
they
No, wait.
do, and
I think that's a separate point. I think Stanley is getting somewhere, and I want him to land right.
I don't
What,
agree
in
with
what
you, SK,
ways?
on this one. Stanley hitting with
In
this.
what ways? In what ways? Black culture has gone wrong, and I
well,
think
I think black culture has gone wrong in a lot of different ways, and I don't
okay.
want to get too far off a field, but I think that people like say, and I like to kind of pick on him. Um, what's his name? Um, oh damn it, I can't even think of his name. I'm getting old. I think that someone, and I'm going to pick on Soul. I think that I think that going too far in trusting that, market economics, for instance, entrepreneurship, that sort of thing. Like, everybody needs to become an entrepreneur. Everybody needs to trust that if you get enough money, we are going to be equal or achieve equality. We will be respected if we all have Oprah or Jay-Z money. And I think that that is where we're going to go wrong.
Okay, so you think that's where black people are going to go wrong, or you think that's where black people have gone wrong?
I
Then,
think we
as a
have I
follow-up,
think we have
how
gone
many
wrong that way too.
how many black people have subscribed to this thing you just described
I'd
now?
say black middle the very large black middle class has.
So, and this is the biggest problem in the black communities, right? Today,
I don't think it's the biggest problem. I think crime tends to be the biggest problem. However, the thing is crime tends to happen in very specific locations. It's not like, I walk outside my door and, I'm worried about a drive-by. It tends to be very bad in the places that it occurs. So
exactly.
the black if the black if the biggest problem in the black community is crime, well, we know where the crime is happening, and I don't know that it's the biggest problem. Quite frankly, I think the biggest problem is not taking education seriously enough.
Mm.
Yeah.
Not
Uh,
And
taking education.
I don't think it's the kids. I I don't think it's the kids that are making the mistake. I think people, and my parents had said, this, and I don't know that I agreed with it at the time, but I think white culture, today's white culture, doesn't take education very seriously. And I
Okay,
think
so
black people are falling off the same cliff.
I
Hmm.
have some follow up questions, but I'll just hold off for now. Let other people contribute. So go ahead,
Well,
guys.
Okay.
Charles, to elaborate farther on what Stanley said about this, is we used to have white kids that would come over and play basketball with us because they wanted to see what the hood looked like. But the moment something pop off, Charles, they go right back to white kid. I didn't do nothing.
Hmm. Let's get see. Who's on?
What do you mean by that? 'Cause the reason why I asked that is because in the scenario you just laid out, it's like a white guy comes to play basketball, and then a shooting happens, and then he says he has nothing to do with it. Well, he didn't have anything to do with it. He was playing ball. Maybe I'm misunderstanding what you're saying, Wolf.
Yeah, if you didn't hear Free Zone, because I know his mic was kind of low, I think he was
Yeah.
asking a question to Wolf, and he
Oh,
was
sorry, I didn't
asking
even hear
My
you.
for.
my bad. Do I sound
Oh,
better?
Yeah,
yeah,
sorry,
go
man. I
ahead.
didn't even hear you. Go
Okay,
ahead,
I'm
man.
sorry. Can you further break down what you mean by what you just stated? Because the scenario
Yeah.
you just laid out was a white man's playing. He comes to the hood to play ball, and then a shootout
Hmm.
happens, and then
Yes.
you saying he has nothing to do with it. Well, he didn't have anything to do with it. He was just playing ball. So can you like further break that
Yeah.
down? I feel like I'm
So
missing something.
what I mean by that is this: is that they say, we want to fuck with y'all, we want to be around y'all, we want to be like y'all until something bad happens. Then they don't want to be around it no more. It's almost like they want to test the pot to see how hot it is until something happens.
But
So
isn't
they
that
should so they
isn't
should
that a
stick
good thing?
around. They should stick around while something
They
is
shouldn't
happening.
come at all.
Oh, okay. I got you.
It's like, and see, bro, that's what I mean. It's like when they see it in the movies, they get this like delusional mindset. Like I remember the white dude that was in the hood with us. He watched Boys in the Hood. He's like, man, I want to do that shit. I want to roll up on somebody and smoke their ass just so I know what it feels like.
Oh shit.
I'm just like, bro, what the hell is wrong with you?
So Wolf,
Oh
let's
shit.
say so Wolf, let's say because we know that the white population is what 6 to 7 times more than the black population. What
Yeah,
would you
something like
say
that.
is what would you say is the percentage of the white dudes that were coming to the neighborhood? Was
Mm,
it like a gang of them? Was it like
it was
5 or 6 or 10 or
two or
what?
three. And they would come with the intention they wanted to see what the neighborhood was like, and they thought, well, let me hang around here for a little bit, see what it's like, and then I'll go run back home. And see, this is what we say: is if you want to roll with the set, you got to be down. You can't get into some trouble with the police and pull the white card and say, nah, I'm not with them. Because what you just
So
did, bro, you became a liability.
so by definition, you're stating that the fringes of that population sought out that style of, I guess, experimentation, but
Yes,
the
and
vast majority would be like, nah, they wouldn't even be there.
correct. And what I mean, that's why I brought up Eminem specifically, because he is the one that kind of created this weird, like, oasis, for example, where they saw one white dude that got down like that, and they all thought they could be like that. And it's like, no, bro, he's still not accepted in black culture today, 20 years later. And they think that
Oh,
just
okay.
because he
So
made it, they can be like him.
right. So okay. So we're me and you we're coming from two opposite perspectives. So
Yeah.
um and I think both are true at the same time, but it's just being described a little bit differently. So
Hmm.
um from your perspective, you're saying, okay, well, there's these people that, they saw this one white dude do this and blah, 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 and then they all want to such and such. And from my
Hmm.
perspective, I'm stating that when I look at the large group,
Yeah.
That's a very small fraction of that group that you're saying want to be
Yes,
like Eminem, and because
yes.
the mass majority don't really care about Eminem at all. A lot of them don't even listen to him or have any. So that's why I'm like, they just at best they just see him as an entertainer.
Yeah, I would say that as of now, nobody's real. The people aren't buying Eminem albums like that. Like people aren't like maybe when he does like a one of his songs like Rap God where he raps a whole bunch of syllables per second. They're like, oh, that's tight, that's dope. And then but they won't buy the album. They're just impressed by the lyricism, let's say, but not enough to commit. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
it's
Yeah.
The kids that are beat that have like the um I would say more or less that's in the middle on up to the upper echelon that uh dad and mom already have certain plans slated out for them. Yeah, that's a non-factor.
Yes,
but
You
I
but
mean
would
M?
say Wolf,
You
I would
mean
say in the
Eminem
same
or
breath,
rap?
I would say
well,
breath in the same breath, Wolf,
Because I disagree with that.
if I walked into a bar full of all whites and
yeah.
a huge fight broke out, I'm probably not going to go back to that bar. Like,
Hmm.
I could make
But
that
okay,
argument too. But I get what you're saying. But it's like
well,
nobody would want to be around that kind of stuff. Is ultimately my point.
but see, here's the thing though. The bar situation is a little bit different because you don't have the culture of the gangs unless you're going to like a bar where you got like Hell's Angels, bikers and shit. It's a little bit different in that situation because you these guys that come here don't know how the system works here. They don't know how the cultures run. And you cross certain areas, bro. That's why we have the rule, don't turn the block 3 times or you might get popped. Like,
Okay,
and the
so
people that come through, yeah,
so you're saying the whites that come in, they want to be part of the gang culture.
they want to see what it's like because they either heard it in a rap lyric. Because see, it ain't just Eminem. See, you had dudes that came along too, like 50. You had, and they're
Hmm.
going back. A lot of these younger kids are going back to the 2000s, the early 90s, and they're discovering Biggie and Nas and Notorious B.I.G. and all that,
Hmm.
and they want to be like them. And then you had that song, 50 Cent put it really well when he did that song Wangster, because you got a lot of these white boys that want to be gangster, but they
Right.
ain't ever did nothing.
Right. And
And then they give rap a bad image.
the same thing happened when NWA came out. Everybody wanted to be, straight out of Compton like that
Hmm.
as well. So no,
Yeah,
I feel what you're saying. I feel what you're saying.
yeah. And it's
Yeah,
like,
I thought you were just talking about like being around black people, like just
oh, no, no,
playing
no.
ball with them and stuff like that. I got you now. You got it, bro. I got
Yeah, because like,
Now the only other
oh,
part
sorry,
that
go ahead.
I'll disagree with Wolf
Hmm.
about, and I think it's just more or less just a perspective thing. Um, this is the part where I think that Black America overstates certain things. I have my reasons why they do that, but making statements like all these people want to be like it's I think that that's a an over it's because I don't know if it's just um a misunderstanding or if it's a feel of a desire for importance or so forth, but there's a lot of other people are involved in things that just like a lot of people that understand all the stuff about the hood. There's a lot of stuff that goes down there. There's terminology, there's jargon, there's various
Hmm.
rules and regulations and so forth. For some reason they don't understand that in other societies there's the same thing, and that they have a huge blind spot because they have not had insight into those groups as well.
What?
Yeah.
And it's almost as like they believe that while they're on the block doing whatever it is they're doing, that the rest of the American public is just dudes sitting in their house twiddling their thumbs. It's like, no, that people are doing other stuff, being involved in a multitude of things that are outside of their scope of knowledge.
Okay. So
Mhm.
we're going to draw this stream to a close pretty soon, maybe in the next 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But I
Oh,
just wanted to highlight something I noticed from Stanley's responses when I asked him to highlight what some of the negative things in American culture. It seems almost as if America's problems are very vanilla and neutral, and they're not that
Well,
deep into deep.
actually thinking about it, excess is America's problem, and that goes across cultures.
No, that's generic, so but no
well,
problem.
Charles
No, it's
too.
not. It's not
What do you
generic at
mean?
all.
What do you mean excess? Access to what?
I mean, excess. We want to make all the money. We want to, we want to drink all the, all the beer. I think in like I said, anything taken to excess is bad. Charles, are you wanting me to do like, white people like to be on time? Are you looking for those sorts of critiques?
I'm not looking on anything. I'm just explaining
You trying to
what
stir up something or what?
no. I'm just explaining how your answer came across. It came across as very neutral, very
Well,
vanilla,
yeah, it is very neutral.
very. Okay.
Well, and Charles, I've said it to you before. I said it to Stanley. I've said it to Script Queen. She's not around as much. But there's even a barricade between what we deem the 60% of blacks that don't support this type of stuff and the 40% who's in the poverty line, and then like I think it's like 8% that lives in the projects. There's a misunderstanding between them even because that is why you'll meet, middle class black men and they'll say, "Hey, bro, I'm not an N word. Don't call me that. Call me by my name." And that's where it comes from. There's a disconnect even between them that needs to be addressed because that's why you have such a huge issue with the middle class blacks not understanding the poor blacks and the poor blacks not understanding them.
Mm. Okay.
Like
So
a classism thing.
Yeah, and that's the
Yes, I would agree in
complicated
that
thing
point.
about America. There's
mm,
race and class issues, but Charles, one last thing. I think the white community in general, and I'm making a huge sweeping gesture here, but this is something that both the left and the right, um, in different ways, I think their biggest problem is they don't know themselves. They don't know their
Mm.
history. They don't want to know their history. They do want to know, the patriotic stuff and that sort of thing. I think America's biggest problem, the biggest problem with the white community, is they do not want to know the details of their history. They just want to know the good stuff.
Hmm.
mm,
And Charles, I
that-
want to make a point on the interracial dating real quick. We'll cover it more in depth. But when the desegregation occurred, a lot of these, whites intermingled with the blacks, and that's why you have a lot of the interracial stuff going on because they want a different flavor of ice cream, as I put it. Some want vanilla, some want chocolate, some want caramel. It don't matter, and that's where it's coming from. That's why you got a lot of controversy surrounding issues such as when Bronny James took that white girl to prom, and they called him a coon, a sellout, blah blah blah, not knowing that his daddy took a white girl to prom too 20 years ago.
mm. So,
I got it.
sorry, go ahead, Frizo, before we take
Nah,
our.
I was gonna say I gotta disagree with that. I think whites are well aware of their history, but they don't look at history the way they don't look at their history the way blacks look at theirs. Like they're not stuck in the past like that, like the way
Freeze
blacks
on,
are. Like
brother. Can I interrupt you? Ask you a question real quick.
yeah, yeah.
How can you? I can't agree with that, bro. This where I'm telling you, Stanley is on point with this. If white people know their history, Why is reparations such an issue with them? But they don't care when the government gives money to everybody else. But when it comes to
Uh,
Black
I,
Americans, they ready to get up in guns and kill people for over this.
Ooh.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. Really quickly, because if you go by the historical context, the majority of the quote unquote, as people will call them, the white people, they weren't even here during slavery. The
That's
majority
what I'm
came at the
saying,
turn
but
of the century, at the turn of the 1900s, and the majority of them had nothing to do with slavery whatsoever.
But
Okay,
do you know who
SKC.
was here? Do you know who was here all the while?
Okay, SKC. So I'm gonna ask the
Do you
question
know?
then.
Do you know who was here all the while? SKC.
And SKC, I'm gonna ask that question
Uh,
because see if we're gonna go that by that logic,
sorry,
then
Wolf. I have a question for SKC.
I'm sorry,
Yes, the majority
Charles,
of
my fault. Go
whites
ahead.
were
I didn't
not
hear you. Go ahead.
here all that while. But do you know who was here all the while?
I'm
The
guessing early white people and also
Nope,
the
nope,
Native
nope, nope,
Americans.
no. The American
and the
government
blacks.
was here all the while,
The
and
what?
the American government and
Yes.
slavery was a U.S. government-backed institution. So, I think it's a massive.
Well, that's a little complicated. It was allowed, but it was really a state based. It
Yeah,
was
but
it was
state.
really that the government allowed the states that had slavery to have it.
So
It was
states are
never
government
like
too.
No.
I disagree. I disagree.
no. I read
Here's my major disagreement with that from that perspective. When people want to say, "Well, the government was here." Okay, you go back to what do you want to say, 1776, and so forth.
for
The
what?
world was operating in slavery.
Okay,
The
no,
entire
no, no, no.
globe.
You, we will
That's
have to take that
no,
offline
no,
because you're
yeah,
absolutely wrong. If you can't say that
So
American slavery was like everywhere else, that's just patently.
SKC, and
no, no, no.
That's
It
I
doesn't
gotta
even
ask
ridiculous.
matter.
this
See,
real quick.
it doesn't even matter if American slavery was like everyone else. That's not an argument.
But
In my mind, that's not an argument to say that everybody was doing slavery. It's not an argument to begin with. But that would be for another stream. So I just want us to take
hold on, Charles.
solutions real
I
quick.
gotta get this out real quick before I forget. SKC. Now, what you said is that the white people, not all of them were here, correct? Now, my counter is this: why don't they get up in arms when we give money to everybody else? They don't say nothing. Their money's being taken, taxpayer money, given here, given there, but they don't want to give it to the people that need help the most in the motherland of America. Why don't they care the
Um,
same way?
I'll say I'll give you a couple of reasons why. One, because a lot of the plans that are put forth before with the whole reparations thing is economically unviable. Give you an example. When they tried to do the thing in California, if they would have went ahead with that, it would have bankrupted California. That's that's it's like that's one of the reasons why you don't
Okay,
go along with
SKC.
certain plans like that. The second thing is that it's look at the optics. Now, if one of the major reasons of why the civil rights plan worked was because of the optics that they put before the world. The world was looking in and they saw individuals who were in their Sunday's best, um, trying to trying to do things in a very non-violent way, following after like the whole Gandhi technique, and they saw that had worked previously, and they were like,
Oh
"Good
boy,
grief, this is being done to these type of people. They're not really doing anything." But look at the
no,
optics today. You have
that's
people
not
who
true.
are basically promoting
Well,
a culture of violence and then
we're going
saying,
to have
"Hey,
SKC, that is
SKC.
SKC. What
Stanley,
swayed
please.
the world was those
Stanley,
people in their Sunday
Stanley,
best getting
Okay.
hosed down
Stanley,
and bitten by
Stanley,
dogs.
Stanley, Stanley.
Charles, I want to respond to what
Hey,
SKC
No,
I,
said.
no, no,
hey,
no, no. We have to
yeah,
do
yeah, yeah, yeah.
the
That's a whole
question.
nother hour. That's a
Yeah,
whole
I
nother.
just want to respond to
we
this
have
real
to do
quick.
this thing.
Now,
So,
SKC,
so,
what you're saying? I want to respond to
whoa,
this real quick, Charles. Can I
whoa,
real quick?
no, no,
whoa,
we can close
no.
out. We can close out. I tell you
I
what.
know
No,
we
you
Let
can
made
me
two
Go
close.
to
points
the.
though,
Let's
bro.
go
I
to
I
the
gotta
know,
Discord.
respond to that.
Yeah, I don't want us to close out anything on reparations now. Nope. I want
No,
us to
Charles, I'm
close
not going
out
to expand any
on the topic.
farther. I just got a statement. That's it.
Whoa, no, sorry about that, but
Hey, salute
um,
everybody. I'm gonna drop off,
Man,
man.
SK,
Please.
nah, y'all gotta hop in the Discord then, bro. We gotta carry
yeah.
this. Come on.
So I
Hey,
want us
I
to talk
you
I'll
about
gonna
meet
you gonna
I'll
part two
meet
with
you in the
SKC?
Discord.
yeah, I
You gonna
want
part
us to
two with
talk about
SKC?
solutions briefly.
Yeah, that's
All
what I
right.
was saying is that I'll open up a show later on this evening if you want to discuss it with me, Wolf, and we can go from there.
Oh, that's
What
fantastic.
time you talk? What time you talking right? Well, I'll hit you on the Discord. I don't want to keep
What?
Charles, man.
I'm not invited.
SKC, bro, hop in the Discord call. Just come on.
All right.
All right.
So my final question to us would be talking about we're talking about hood dynamics, right? What solutions do you think can be preferred for the problems in the hood, right? So we'll go with Free Zone, Stanley, and Wolf. What do you think? Just 2 points. What do you think the solutions
I
are?
I'm gonna give my points to Wolf because I don't know.
Okay.
Wolf and I disagree. I think the police aren't doing their job. I think that's the fundamental thing.
Well,
And I
it's not
think
even that deep, Stanley. It's even simpler than that.
Um, if, yeah, if I could expand on that, I wouldn't say it's the police. I would say it's the DAs. Like when they get in front of the judge and all that, the decisions that are made regarding that. You got to get rid of the people who are causing the issues first and
Hmm.
foremost. And then the second thing, um, the culture has to change, man. It's just I like there's so many. I don't want to pin it down on like two big ones, but I'll just throw those
mhm.
two out. The culture has to change, and there has to be harsher penalties for crimes that these folks are committing because you shouldn't be able to just do something wild in the hood and then
Well,
get locked up and then be released on bail or whatever all that stuff is. Like, nah, keep them in there, keep them locked up, throw away the
that's
key,
well. One
and that
thing that I want
for
to
me,
add:
that's it.
All right. Thank you,
the
Freedom.
right needs to stop equating hood culture with black culture.
And
When
that would
when they when they say the culture needs to change, they mean black culture, and I think they're wrong for saying that.
Now, Charles, I got three solutions for this.
okay.
Number one, all the money that these trap houses make. Like I said, they run 50, 60, sometimes $100,000 a week. When a trap house gets busted, the drugs need to be destroyed and the money needs to be given to the state and reinvested, not confiscated by the police department, and then it just vanishes. Number two, instead of doing Section 8 rent, how about Section 8 to own, where the person living there has the opportunity to purchase the home down the road? And I agree with Free Zone on the third point. The only thing is the there's a discrimination in the courtroom when it comes to prosecutions to an extent, and I think that black men need to stop being looked at as what we saw with Central Park. Is it Central Park 6
Yeah,
or
six
5?
five.
Because there
Well,
was
that
multiple
was all
basketball
Trump.
players. Yes, well, to
That
tie it in, but
now
see,
you just triggered me with Trump.
but see, there's an automatic assumption, and this is why you see a lot of brothers that don't hook up with the white chicks in certain situations because there is a thing where white girl can scream rape, as we've seen multiple times with multiple famous black men, and the brother has to pay millions of dollars or he gets prison sentences without even proof being shown. That's a discriminatory act right there. The court system needs to be fair. Those three things right there, you do them, a couple generations from now, the hood will be a lot better.
Well, what does the hood have to do with white girls?
Well, the white girls come to the hood because they want the
They
gangsters and
do?
they want the athletes. Yes. Oh yeah, Stanley. They love them.
Oh wow, okay.
Because you gotta understand, bro, it's the same reason that you who's that one girl? Uh I can't remember her name right now, but she hooked up with an NBA star and nobody even knew who she was before she got with him. And then she admitted she got with him to have a baby to take his money. And I mean the brother fell for it, so it's on him. I'm just saying that needs to change. So just the summary again: trap house money back to the community, fix the court system, and don't let these dudes out. But on top of that, like I said, fix the education, and then create a system where if the government owns the property, there needs to be an opportunity for that person to buy the home over time. Because once you own property, you own assets.
Hop on the Discord because I want to talk about that housing thing.
Yeah. But I mean, there's more, Charles, but I just think you do them things right there because people take pride in a community once they own something. And if people own their house, that'll fix a lot of these problems because people will take care in their household.
All right. Thank you very much, guys. Really, really enjoyed myself. Fruitful
Yeah,
to
I did
our
too.
conversation. We're going to be having another conversation soon. I want us to talk about the interracial dating. So, Wolf, whenever you have the chance, please let's set that up.
Yeah.
So
Sorry it took
Stanley,
long, Charles.
no, no problem, no problem. Stanley, please get in touch with SKC,
Yeah, I will.
the one on education, so you can set it up to let's talk about that. And I really want
Okay.
us to do something on reparations, right? So we're going to do something on reparations some other time.
Okay.
Soon. So for Danny Nightblade, we can have this conversation some other time, right? So I'll just put it out there that Americans or white people in America ended slavery in America is not unique. It's not exceptional. Who was going to end it anyway? Was it going to be the Chinese? Was it going to be whoever? So I know Americans like to think everything about America is exceptional. Stanley would say American slavery is exceptional. White people would say
Uh,
Americans ending slavery is exceptional. No, it's
well, I
not.
wouldn't say it was exceptional.
So
I would make the caveat
you,
that slavery wasn't ended
you,
in America
you Americans
voluntarily.
deal you Americans have to deal with the fact that you are not exceptional, whether those fighting for slavery and those. Anyway, so that's another stream. Thank you guys for
There we
coming.
go.
We'll have more fruitful conversations. It's bye for now.
All
Take
right,
it
see you,
easy,
Charles.
Charles.
Yeah, bye.